Imagine this. You're standing in a world where everyone is sprinting towards success. Some choose to play fair, holding on to their principles as if they were an oath. But some lie without blinking, manipulate as if by instinct, and are willing to crush anyone who stands in their way. Strangely enough, these are often the ones standing at the very top. And then a painful question appears. Why does the world seem designed to favor the conscienceless? Maybe the problem isn't them. Maybe it's the illusion you were taught to believe. We grew up with a gentle lullaby, live well, and life will reward you. But history, politics, and the marketplace tell a different story, rougher and truer. Power belongs to those who understand how the world works and dare to take it. And this is where Nietzsche steps in like a blade. He doesn't only ask, what is good? He asks, who gets to define good and evil? Because sometimes what is called morality isn't truth at all, but a beautiful collar, one that keeps you obedient while someone else climbs. But wait. If you think this video is going to tell you to become a bad person, you've already fallen into the first trap. This video will reveal the unwritten rules that let the ruthless move first, and a third path to break every limit without letting you rot from the inside. Don't leave, because if you skip the end, you will likely misunderstand Nietzsche, and you'll keep losing even while believing you're living right. Number 1. Power is not a reward for good people. Many people were taught a beautiful story, so beautiful it can lull an entire lifetime to sleep. Work hard, be kind, live right, and heaven will repay you. That story is like a parking ticket for the soul. You believe that if you keep it safe, someone will open the gate for you at the end of the day. But life does not operate like a moral checkout counter. Power does not look at you as someone deserving. Power looks at you as a force, one that can seize, expand, impose, and redefine reality. When Nietzsche speaks of truth, he does not speak to make you despair. He speaks so you stop begging a god in the sky, stop waiting for a fair scoring system that never existed. The world does not hand power to good people as a prize. The world gives power to those who know how to take it, keep it, and use it to write the rules. You can see this anywhere. Some people work seriously, who don't play dirty, and still get passed over at year's end for being not noticeable enough. Many call that injustice. Nietzsche would call it a mechanism. That mechanism works like gravity. It neither hates you nor loves you. It simply responds to what has weight. Hard work and kindness can make you admirable, but they don't automatically become weight in the game of power. If you bring a clean heart into a battlefield, you can still fall like anyone else. Not because you're wrong, but because you're using a currency in a place that doesn't accept it. Kind people often believe there is a moral layer above everything, where justice will arrive like the sunrise. That belief makes them delay action, wait for proper procedure, fear being misunderstood, fear being hated, fear being seen as ambitious. Kind people often tie their own hands with an invisible cord called, "Don't do that. What will people think?" Meanwhile, the ruthless don't need justice to act. They need results. They see the world like a chessboard, where every move has value and every hesitation is a lost move. The difference isn't intelligence. The difference is who dares to move first. Try to recall the times you wanted to speak up, but swallowed your words for fear of being talked about. The times you wanted to propose an idea, but held back for fear of being seen as showing off. The times you wanted to leave, but stayed only because you were thinking of others. The world actually asks you for one simple thing: the courage to step forward. But kind people sometimes confuse stepping up with stepping on, and choose to stand still so they won't feel like the bad one. That confusion becomes a cocoon that slows you down. If you've ever lived that feeling, leave a specific moment in the comments. And if you have a friend who is tying themselves up the same way, send this video to them, because sometimes simply naming the cocoon is already the beginning of awakening. In history, politics, and commerce, those who rise are often those who understand the unwritten rules. And those rules aren't found in moral textbooks. They live in collective psychology, in the way human beings are led by fear and desire. You can see a new phenomenon online called rage bait. Gentle content gets scrolled past, but a hook that stirs emotion gets shared. Algorithms have no conscience, but they reflect exactly what people crave. And that craving isn't for truth. It's for psychological pleasure. That's why those who know how to press the right buttons in others often go farther than those who only try to live right. Behavioral science labels many of these patterns with dry terms, but the essence is uncannily close to Nietzsche. People are more easily seduced by story than by data, because the brain saves energy by believing what is easy to swallow. Nietzsche saw this tragedy early. Traditional morality is often lifted like a torch to guide you, yet it can also become a noose. The ruthless believe in efficiency, so they act first. They are willing to pay with their reputation to buy a position, willing to be hated to become the one with power. This part will make you uncomfortable, because it touches the place you've soothed for far too long. The feeling that you lived well and still lost. That feeling makes people either collapse or turn into resentment. Nietzsche doesn't want you to fall into either. He wants you to look the game in the face, so you stop being naive. You don't have to become a bad person to admit this mechanism. You only need to stop living as if power is a reward reserved for good people. You need to see power as a natural phenomenon. Kind people often fear power because they label it bad, then leave it for the ruthless to use. Nietzsche would ask a question as sharp as a blade. If you let power fall into the hands of the ruthless, are you helping create the world you hate? That question isn't meant to accuse you. It's meant to wake you. And when you truly see this, you cross a threshold out of illusion. When the illusion falls away, you are no longer exploited by those who understand the unwritten rules, because you have begun to see the chessboard. But once you see the chessboard, you must see something even subtler than the moves. The names pasted onto the pieces. Because power doesn't win only through action. Power also wins through language, through who gets to call you right or wrong. And in that moment, the game shifts into a deeper layer. Morality as a weapon. Number 2. Good and evil is not the truth but a weapon. When someone is hit by a storm of criticism and contempt, the most painful part is often not the wound, but the story the stabber builds afterward. That story says you are the troublemaker, you deserve it, and turns them into the one doing it for the collective. And in that moment, you touch a truth Nietzsche saw more clearly than almost anyone. Good and evil are not just moral judgments, they are labels of power. He wrote, "There are no moral phenomena at all, but only a moral interpretation of phenomena." Nietzsche flips the table not to encourage evil, but to break chains. He wants you to understand that many things you call right are simply things named to serve the interests of an era, a group, an order that wants to survive. Good and evil don't fall from the sky like natural law. They are forged in history like coins minted from sweat, blood, and obedience. If you read Nietzsche as lofty philosophy, you will miss his real danger. He digs beneath beautiful words like humility, kindness, and sacrifice, then asks a simple question that makes people uneasy. Who benefits when you believe this? That question makes entire moral systems tremble because it shifts the center from what is right to right for whom. And when you look from that angle, morality begins to look like a map drawn by the victors. Try to remember the last time you were branded selfish. Maybe you only refused an unreasonable favor. Maybe you only set a boundary. Maybe you only chose yourself instead of pleasing everyone. But the label selfish drops like a hammer because it doesn't strike the action, it strikes the identity. People don't say, "What you did doesn't fit." They say, "You are a bad person." And once you fear becoming a bad person, you begin to censor yourself, shrink yourself down. Nietzsche calls this the most refined game, turning power into moral doctrine, turning obedience into virtue. Morality, for Nietzsche, is the product of power conflict. That conflict doesn't only happen in streets or battlefields. It happens in how human beings define what is noble. Because whoever gets to name good and bad gets to set the rules of the game. You can see this clearly in modern moral cancellations. K-pop, for example, an idol doesn't step onto the stage carrying only a voice and choreography. They carry a moral dossier kept open under millions of eyes. The online crowd scrutinizes every bull, every expression when receiving a trophy, even a glance that accidentally meets the camera. A tiny act, smiling at the wrong moment, not bowing deeply enough, a brief grimace from exhaustion, or choosing the wrong word in a live stream can be cut into a few seconds of clip and turned into evidence of character. That idol can be praised to the heavens and in the next instant dragged down and pummeled with harsh condemnation. The label bad gets thrown, and suddenly everything else becomes reasonable. Insults become acceptable, destruction becomes acceptable, because they deserve it. Social psychology calls part of this mechanism moral licensing and moral outrage, the feeling of righteousness that allows people to be cruel while still seeing themselves as good. Nietzsche sensed this more than a century ago. He simply didn't use scientific language. He understood that someone can do the cruelest thing in the name of good and sleep better than an ordinary criminal because they believe they are protecting values. Purges in history often don't begin with greed, they begin with morality. Do you know about the Salem witch trials in 1692 in America? A vague accusation like, "She looked at me with strange eyes, she's different," was enough to drag a person into court. Girls, women, and men were branded witches because the crowd had decided they were a threat. And once that standard was stamped onto them, torture and hanging became inevitable because it was to protect the community. Raw violence makes the victim hurt, but violence wearing the mask of morality makes the victim believe they deserve punishment. And that, to Nietzsche, is the darkest kind of power. Standards can help society function at first, but when they become absolute, they turn into fences that block your growth. Nietzsche does not say all morality is false. Nietzsche says you must be wary of morality the way you are wary of sleeping pills. Michel Foucault believes modern power doesn't live only in the whip, it lives in shaping norms. Nietzsche arrived earlier in that spirit. He saw morality as a psychological technology, a way to make human beings more predictable, easier to control, easier to use. When morality becomes a machine, it produces good people in bulk, but it also kills the individuals capable of creating new values. And this is what makes Nietzsche mysterious. He doesn't hate morality because he loves evil. He hates morality when it becomes a shackle that locks life in place. You will feel enlightened in one very specific moment. The moment you realize how many times you didn't do what was right, how many times you didn't tell the truth, simply because you were afraid of being hated. And when you realize that, you also realize why manipulators often win. They call the opponent bad to legitimize elimination. They understand that in a society obsessed with right and wrong, whoever controls right and wrong controls the crowd. But this is not meant to push you into nihilism. This is meant to give you something more precious: eyes. When you see morality as a historical tool rather than natural law, you begin to ask the right questions. Does this value serve life or suffocate life? Does this norm make me grow or make me obedient so I can be used? And when you dare to ask that, you step through a door many never step through, leaving morality as superstition, entering morality as a conscious choice. At this point, a strange chill can rise in the viewer, because they will understand that the winner doesn't win only with money or authority. The winner is the one who no longer lets others name their life, the one who begins to reclaim what Nietzsche sees as the condition of freedom, the ability to define good for oneself, instead of living like a creature that must ask permission just to exist. Number 3, will to power. The deepest reason evil people often win. There is a question that can exhaust a person for an entire lifetime, and yet very few ever truly find the answer. What do I want most? Many people would say human beings want happiness, peace, and to be loved. Nietzsche looks straight into the unflattering side of life and says something else, colder but truer. Human beings want power. Human beings should want the feeling that they can affect the world, expand their influence, be seen, be recognized, or at the very least, not be led around by the nose. Nietzsche calls that drive the will to power. Don't misunderstand and think, but I don't want power. Because even when you say you don't crave power, you may still be craving another kind of power. The power to be seen as competent, the power to be loved, the power to feel safe in the eyes of the crowd. When you understand that, you begin to see the world the way Nietzsche sees it, not as a stage of good and evil, but as a current of forces trying to impose shape upon reality. If you only understand power as money and titles, you will miss the most delicate part. Money and titles are like the visible tip of an iceberg. The will to power lives in 3 forms of power you encounter every day, yet rarely name. The first is psychological power, the power to control another person's emotions. You see it in a relationship where one person only needs to go silent, only needs to disappear, and the other panics, apologizes, and begins doubting themselves. You see it in meetings where someone only needs a glance, a smirk, a mocking laugh, and the whole room immediately shrinks. Science calls it emotional manipulation, a mechanism that produces anxiety and dependence, but Nietzsche would name it directly: power. Whoever holds another person's emotions holds their behavior. The second is symbolic power, the power to define right and wrong, noble and base, lovable and contemptible. This kind of power is more dangerous than money, because money can purchase behavior, but symbols purchase belief. Someone doesn't need to be rich to manipulate society if they can make the crowd believe this is the standard and that is wrong. You see it in advertising, when a product is sold, not through quality, but through the feeling of class, the social status it promises. You see it on social media when a trend creates a new standard in only a few days. The third is creative power, the power to create trends and create value systems. This is the kind of power Nietzsche both fears and admires, because it turns a human being into a shaper of reality. An artist can change how a generation understands love. A founder can change how a society consumes. A content creator can change how the crowd evaluates itself. Creative power is the power of the one who sets a new standard. Whoever can do that makes others adjust automatically to keep up. The ruthless often have an advantage here because they are willing to spark controversy, willing to make people angry, and willing to be hated in exchange for attention. They understand that in a world starved of focus, attention is the gateway to power. The difference between a kind person and a ruthless one is not that one has will to power and the other doesn't. Everyone has it. The difference lies in who recognizes it and uses it as a tool, and who denies it, then lets it control them in the dark. This is the deepest reason evil people often win. They are not blocked by the illusion that they should only want noble things. They want real power, and they act like someone who wants power. Meanwhile, many good people want power, but don't dare to name it, so they act like someone who only wants to be recognized as good. Let me tell you a true story. In 2018, Greta Thunberg was just a 15-year-old girl sitting alone outside the Swedish parliament, holding a sign that read, "School Strike for Climate." The act looked so small that many people mocked it, and then the wave of attacks came. People ridiculed her appearance, her voice, and there were even public comments that deliberately humiliated her, using her autism. But Greta didn't disappear. She kept showing up consistently, kept pulling the world's attention toward one point. The climate doesn't need promises. The climate needs action. Her Fridays for Future movement spread from one lonely seat into a global wave in only about a year, and Reuters described clearly how Greta went from a lone protester to the face leading an international movement. In 2019, Time named her Person of the Year, as a marker that being hated does not stop influence, if the person keeps building something larger than themselves. The will to power is a reminder that life does not promise safety. Life promises a struggle among forces that want to become more. When you understand that, you begin to see that evil people are not always stronger. Often, they only have one advantage: they are not broken by the need to be loved. Here, try being honest once in the comments. What kind of power do you crave most? Recognition, love, or freedom? And which decision did it just command in your life recently? When you see through the will to power, you have to face the question Nietzsche leaves you with. Do you dare to want power in a deeper sense? Meaning, Do you dare to shape your own life? Dare to give form to your reality? Dare to take responsibility for your choices? Dare to be hated when necessary? Dare to break standards when those standards are only a cage? And the moment you dare to ask that question, a strange feeling appears, like waking up from a long dream. You realize that power has always been inside you. Number 4. The mechanism of winning, 4 traits of the immoral. When you see immoral people often win, it's easy to think they have some uncanny luck, as if the universe favors the bad. Nietzsche would tell you to look closer, because what's happening is not magic, it's the psychology of power. People who climb through a colder path often share 4 traits, like 4 keys that open the same kind of door. These traits don't necessarily make them smarter, but they make them more aligned with how power works. The first trait is ambition as instinct, an appetite that cannot sit still. Nietzsche wrote in The Will to Power, "Every living thing does everything it can not to preserve itself, but to become more." Ordinary people want stability. They want tomorrow to be as peaceful as today. Powerful people want expansion. They are addicted to the sensation of growth. They treat every achieved goal as a new boundary, as a sign they must keep expanding. You may have wondered, why are there entrepreneurs who are already so wealthy, yet still keep making money, starting more companies, diversifying into more fields? People like this keep asking, how do I grow further? Even when they already have a lot. They are addicted to the pursuit itself, and they turn their life into a hunt. Nietzsche would call that hunger a raw form of the will to power. The second trait is decisiveness, because in the realm of power, hesitation is self-withdrawal. Good people often pause at crossroads to weigh right and wrong, to make sure they choose correctly. Powerful people often see crossroads as the most dangerous place, because anyone who stands there too long gets pushed down. They choose a path, move, and adjust while moving. They understand a brutal truth. Opportunity belongs to the one who decides first. You can see this in meetings where an idea is still floating in the air. The hesitant say, "Let's see, let's consider." The decisive say, "Do it," then turn themselves into the one who bears responsibility, and power begins to flow toward them. You may dislike that kind of person because they can seem forceful, but the world often gives position to whoever is willing to take the wheel, even when that steering is imperfect. Nietzsche doesn't glorify recklessness, but he understands that long hesitation is a kind of self-amputation, because it tells life you don't believe you have the right to choose. The third trait is strategic coldness, cutting emotion out of decisions at the right moment. Many people react immediately. Coldness is bad. But Nietzsche would ask you an uncomfortable question. Do you want to live in the world as it is, or as you wish it should be? Because in the game of power, emotion that isn't managed becomes a weakness to be exploited. The immoral are not without feelings. They have feelings, but they don't let feelings dominate when decisions must be made. In business, this strategic coldness appears when a leader cuts staff to save cash flow. In politics, it appears when people shake hands with former enemies for profit. In personal life, it appears when someone cuts you out without explanation because you no longer belong to the life they are building. Many call that cruelty. Nietzsche calls it strength, and he warns that this strength can create conquerors, but it can also create monsters if it lacks self-mastery. The fourth trait is knowing how to use morality as a mask, and this is the key that makes them most dangerous. The immoral aren't foolish enough to look ruthless all the time. They understand that society still worships morality like a soft religion, so they learn to speak the language of the good. When necessary, they appear to be trusted. They treat morality like social clothing, and they wear it when it benefits them. When they reach their goal, they remove the mask and change the rules. They can even use morality to break someone more moral than themselves. They say, "I don't want to compete," while they have already placed themselves in the only position with the right to decide. Nietzsche sees this game and calls it a refined kind of lying by turning oneself into the embodiment of right, so that anyone who opposes them automatically becomes wrong. You can see these four traits as four layers of a predator. Ambition is the hungry belly that keeps it searching for prey. Decisiveness is the claw that lunges before the prey can run. Strategic coldness is the ability not to stop for the prey's cry. The moral mask is the camouflage that lets it enter the herd without being detected. When these four combine, you understand why many kind people get struck down without even realizing what happened. You think you're playing a transparent game, but the opponent is playing a different one, where the rules are written in psychology, not in principles. But the most important part is not to make you hate them. The most important part is to make you stop being naive. You don't need to become immoral to survive, but you must understand these mechanisms so you won't be swallowed. If you don't understand them, you will be surprised when others always want more than what they were given, and you will let emotion turn you into a hostage. And from that moment on, you can begin to build a different kind of strength. Not the strength to destroy others, but the strength that keeps no one from using you as raw material for their ambition anymore. Number 5. Nietzsche's warning. Evil power comes with a price. Evil power comes with a sweet promise and a poisonous cost. The promise says that if you are only colder, more ruthless, you will climb to the top. The cost runs quietly underneath: paranoia, exhaustion, and a kind of hollow meaning that is hard to name. Nietzsche is not naive about the seduction of power. He is painfully clear-eyed about where it ends. He sees a paradox. Manipulators often win quickly, but they rarely feel safe. They can conquer others, but they pay by being conquered from within, by the very thing they worship. Power is like strong liquor. One sip makes you feel high, but drink it long enough and the liver rots, the mind warps, and in the end, you need the drink just to keep living. Those who climb through manipulation must live in a state of suspicion, because they know exactly how they got there. Someone who once used sweet words to deceive will believe anyone can use sweet words to deceive them. Someone who betrays to move upward will always imagine others betraying them. Nietzsche once described that kind of psyche as a degeneration of instinct. When you live by tricks, you turn the world into a trap, and then you lock yourself inside it. The manipulator reads every compliment as a plot. The manipulator hears even silence as a threat. That paranoia is not karma in some mystical sense. It is the logical consequence of treating people as tools. Someone who uses people will no longer believe people are purely human. Paranoia carries another burden: the need to lie constantly to protect an image. A manipulator is not allowed to appear as who they really are. They must perform, manage other people's emotions, and control how the story gets told. They live like editors of reality, polishing every sentence, cutting every detail, adding layers of morality to make it all look legitimate. Every day becomes a long performance, and performing for too long becomes exhausting. A body can endure pressure for a while, but it cannot endure forever. The burnout comes not from working too much, but from maintaining a fabricated identity. When suspicion becomes habit and lying becomes breath, manipulators slowly lose the ability to love and the ability to trust. Love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is what the manipulator dismisses as foolish. Trust requires a measure of dependence, and dependence is what the manipulator reads as loss of control. So they live inside a fortress, safe but lonely. People may fear them, respect them, follow them for profit, but few truly stay out of affection. And here the deepest tragedy shows itself. They win the outer world, but lose the inner one. They may own the entire room, yet they cannot own a single minute of peace. They may have many people around them, yet they have no one who truly understands them, because they themselves do not dare to let anyone see who they really are. You hold power in your hands, but power holds you in your mind. It bends the way you see people, the way you see life, the way you see yourself. And at some point, you no longer do ruthless things to reach a goal. You do ruthless things because you don't know another way to survive. That is the moment you become a slave to the very formula that lifted you. Nietzsche does not tell you to abandon strength. Nietzsche warns you about a kind of strength that lacks self-mastery, lacks depth, lacks self-knowledge. Evil power is often built by bending other people, and so it lacks one crucial foundation: self-respect. Those who do not respect themselves must compensate by forcing others to respect them. Those who lack inner power must compensate with outer power, and that compensation is a bottomless pit. Every time you win through manipulation, you need another win to keep feeding the sensation of power. Thank you for staying with me this far, because if you're still here after these cold truths, it means you're not watching for entertainment. You're truly examining how power moves in your own life. And this final part is the most valuable. Nietzsche points to a third path, one that lets you grow stronger without losing yourself. If what you've heard so far has touched your experience, a like as a quiet sign of "I get it" will help this video reach the people who need it. And if you want to go deeper with Nietzsche, psychology, and self-overcoming, you can subscribe so you won't miss what comes next. Number 6. Nietzsche's third path. After everything you've heard, a temptation often arises. You want to choose one of two extremes. Either you cling to morality like a lifebuoy and keep being good until you get crushed, or you throw the buoy away, decide to become cold, learn to manipulate, learn to step on others because you think that is the only way to survive. Nietzsche does not stand at either extreme. Nietzsche opens a third path, and that path is harder, lonelier, but higher, becoming so strong that you don't need to be low. Nietzsche challenges you to create your own values, master yourself, and become your own standard, rather than living like a puppet pulled by the fear of being hated or the hunger to be praised. When you understand Nietzsche correctly, you see that he is not preaching morality. He is preaching something sharper: maturity. Overcoming yourself is not a self-help slogan. It is a way of living. The weak win by pulling others down because they have no energy of their own. The strong win by lifting themselves because they understand a brutal truth. You cannot build a future by living in someone else's shadow. You can see this difference clearly on social media. One kind of person rises through drama and scandal, and then must feed their channel with drama for life because they have nothing else to create. Another kind of person quietly upgrades skills, thinking, value, and creates a more lasting gravity. Nietzsche calls that ascent self-overcoming, because each day you are fighting an old version of yourself, not fighting other people. To walk the third path, you must revalue all values. You stop letting the crowd decide what is noble in your life. You begin to live by 3 new questions, sharper and more honest. The first question: what makes you grow, and what merely makes you accepted? The second question: what makes you more truthful, and what merely makes you well-behaved? The third question: what gives your life aesthetic form, style, contour, a signature, rather than turning it into nothing but a chain of working, enduring, and then consoling yourself? The third path is inner discipline, discipline over power within. That is why you need 4 capacities, like 4 layers of mental armor. The first capacity is to read the unwritten rules and face reality. You must see who is setting the rules, who is telling the story, who is using morality as a weapon, and who is using emotion to steer you. This capacity is like seeing the invisible strings of a magic trick. The second capacity is setting boundaries. You cannot step into power if you do not dare to refuse, because those who cannot refuse will always become someone else's resource. The third capacity is decisiveness and responsibility. You must choose and move, then adjust while moving, instead of standing forever at the crossroads waiting for a flawless choice. The fourth capacity is keeping a cool head when you decide, and a warm heart when you protect dignity. You don't let emotion blind you, but you also don't let power rot your heart. You can be firm without becoming low. You can be strategic without betraying yourself. And when you train these things, you feel something strange, as if the fog in front of your eyes has dissolved. You no longer envy the ruthless. You no longer fear being hated, as if your breath were being squeezed out. You no longer need to prove you are good to live. You step into a new position, the position of someone who creates their own values. If Nietzsche wants to leave you one thing after this conversation, it is not bitterness, but lucidity. When you look at life with eyes no longer lulled by beautiful stories, you stop being surprised when the ruthless rise. You also stop condemning yourself whenever you must be firm. This world does not need you to become a saint, and it does not need you to become a demon. This world only reveals a silent question. Do you have the backbone to live as a truly free person? And when you begin to choose freedom, another kind of power appears, the power of someone who masters themselves, takes responsibility, and walks forward. From that moment, you no longer ask, why do bad people win? You begin to ask, who must I become so I can no longer be led by the nose?